In the first half of this module, we'll be creating our API documentation using a tool, apiDoc. apiDoc will generate a static website containing our API documentation. It bases this on the inline documentation that we're going to put in our source code, which will describe the features of our API. Let's begin by creating a JSON config file for apiDoc by going to the terminal and typing touch apiDoc.json. Let's now add the basic config we'll need in this file. So we'll begin by creating an object, and then we'll add a name property, and we'll assign the name of our API, which is of course printbay. We'll then add a version property, and we can set that to 1.0.0. Next we'll add a description, and we can just simply make that API docs. We'll also add a title, which will be printbay API, and that title is going to be used as the title of the generated website. Finally, we'll add a URL property, and we'll make that http://localhost 8080. So apiDoc will use this as the base URL for the endpoints in the documentation. Now that we have a config file, we can manually generate the docs site using the apiDoc CLI. However, it's a much easier development experience to have a development server, preferably with live reloading. So to do this, we're going to use the apiDoc Grunt plugin. Now, if you've never used Grunt before, it's a task runner that, while still in use now, was most popular a few years ago before Webpack became the tool of choice for creating build pipelines like this. I've already added the Grunt configuration to the root directory of the project, as well as all the necessary npm modules. So be sure to check out the Module 7 source code and run npm install before continuing. So let's quickly review this Grunt file. So there are 3 distinct tasks that this file defines. Firstly, this task up here, apiDoc. And apiDoc will generate the docs site based on the code that it finds at this path, server routes. Secondly, there's the HTTP server task, and that will serve the generated docs on port 8050. Thirdly, we have the watch task, and that will watch our code for changes and will trigger the apiDoc task to run again. Let's now run the Grunt file by going back to the terminal and typing npx grunt. Once Grunt is running, you should be able to come to the browser now and open http localhost 8050, and you should now see the skeleton of the API docs. Rather than directly running the Grunt tasks, let's add some npm scripts. So the first script that we'll add will have the alias docs serve API, and the command for this one will simply be grunt. We'll also add a command docs build API, and the command for this one will be grunt apiDoc. So the purpose of this second command is to simply build the docs without running the dev server. With that done, let's go back to the terminal, kill the current Grunt task, and then try npm run docs serve API to make sure that works, and it does. Before we start filling out the documentation, let's make sure we get live reloading working for our doc site, so that when we make a change to the source code, the doc site reloads automatically to reflect that change. Now with a Webpack dev server, we get live reloading out of the box, as Webpack builds a socket client into the generated source code during development. Grunt doesn't work the same way, so unfortunately we don't get this feature out of the box. Instead, what we're going to do is install a browser plugin called Live Reload. So you can get this by going to livereload.com/extensions, which is the page I'm looking at here now, and finding the extension that's appropriate for your browser. So if you've got Chrome, you want to come down here, click this link, and go ahead and install it. So I've already configured the Grunt file so that the development server will communicate with this extension. So all you need to do is install that extension, and hopefully live reloading will work.